What does it take to achieve a natural sound when you speak in American English pronunciation? Well, today we are going to find out taking a look at a couple of pronunciation files that you have sent to us. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, guys. Welcome to your American English pronunciation review show, which is the Schwa Mill. Name is Jeff. It rhymes with breath. That's one of the four keys to a natural sound in American English, including placement, pitch, breath. Trying to weaken your consonant sounds in order to strengthen your vowel sounds. And today we're going to be looking at two more pronunciation files that you have sent to us to get reviewed. We're going to be looking at things, for instance, like placement, pitch, breath, and vowels to help make sure that we're sounding as natural as possible. I've got two clips again. And if you have a clip that you would like us to look at in the future, if you look at the video description for this video, you're going to see a link to a free Telegram group where I select files from. People send in the files, they ask questions, I pick two, and then we review it right here. Let's take a look at our first file for today.
I believe globalization is forcing our brains to evolve.
Okay, let me play that one more time.
I believe globalization is forcing our brains to evolve.
And thank you, as always, for sending this file. There's a couple of things that stand out to me with this. I think there's a lot of components to this that already sound pretty natural, starting with, for instance, breath and resonance.
I believe globalization is forcing our brains to evolve.
Okay, like forcing our breath, you can hear kind of that low droning sound. So that sounds to me like we are using our diaphragm. We're getting some breath involved and things like that, which is great. There's also a bit of pitch movement as well to start. So notice that like the amount of pitches we're using between that opening thought group with like the I believe, and then at the end after globalization, just kind of see the whole range of pitches we're using here.
I believe globalization is forcing our brains to evolve.
Like forcing our brains, I believe, forcing our brains. So there's a decent amount of pitch ranges being used here. I do think that we have an opportunity to perhaps achieve some more natural linking by potentially adding some or mixing or incorporating some longer thought groups, because one thing I'm noticing here is the pattern is a little bit choppy.
I believe globalization is forcing our brains to evolve.
So it's kind of like, I believe globalization is forcing our brains to evolve. So like what's happening is we're getting like these thought groups that are about 2 to 3 syllables in length. I believe globalization is forcing our brains to evolve. And part of the reason that that is happening, where we're kind of just like lots of heavy stresses that are also very separate from each other. So we're never really kind of linking things together. It's the difference between saying it like this.
I believe globalization is forcing our brains to evolve.
And I believe globalization is forcing our brains to evolve, or something like that. Or now what's happening is I'm using some longer thought groups. So instead of like forcing our brains to evolve, more forcing our brains to evolve, forcing our brains to evolve, you know. Or if you want to stress evolve, like forcing our brains to evolve, forcing our brains to evolve. So like, things like that. I think we have an opportunity here to maybe link some more of these thought groups together, and that's going to give us a chance to flow. I often compare thought groups to like runways. Imagine you're a pilot with a plane. Would you rather land the plane on a short runway or a long runway? A long runway is going to give you a lot more room to navigate. Part of the reason that I think this audio file isn't fully tapping into some low pitches, because hearing your voice, it sounds to me like you could have access to some lower pitches if we allowed ourselves to get there. It's harder to do that with a short thought group, though. Like forcing our brains to evolve. Do you see how like I'm just kind of like dragging it down nice and slow? Forcing our brains to evolve. Forcing our brains to evolve. Whereas if I like forcing our brains to evolve, if I'm constantly shifting my thought groups like that, it becomes much harder to tap into. So I think linking our thought groups together, accessing some lower pitches can help this continue to sound even more natural. the last thing I'll say with this one.
I believe globalization is forcing our brains to evolve.
Okay, with this word globalization. Okay, which is fine. You can say it that way. You'll hear native speakers saying that way as well. You will also hear native speakers saying it as globalization. Globalization. So it says globalization. So lies. You can do lies, but a lot of times you hear native speakers just globalization. Just a note there. But thank you so much for sending that audio file. Can't do this without you. I hope you found that helpful. Before we take a look at our second audio file, do you want to just give a quick shout out to our sponsor, which is me. I'm the sponsor, and I want to talk a little bit about our pronunciation group on Telegram. So it can be a little bit confusing. We actually have two Telegram groups. We have the free one for these streams. It's free to join. You can do it right now if you go to the video description, and you can send in audio files for me to review for our next stream, which happens again on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays at 7:30 a.m. New York. However, if you're trying to get feedback for yourself every single day, because the problem with these streams is that I'm looking at two files and I may not get to yours. So if you're trying to get feedback from me every single day, well, that's where the full Telegram group comes in. You send in audio files. I give you feedback within 24 hours. You can reply, trying again, making corrections and adjustments. You can also send in files of yourself saying phrases you need for work, phrases that you use all the time, new vocabulary you're practicing, whatever it is that you want to get checked on by a coach. That's what the full Telegram group is for. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you want to get feedback from a native speaker whenever you have doubts, questions, then that's what this group can help you with. You can go to fluentamerican.com/telegram for more info on that. Let's take a listen to our second audio file.
When I was a kid, I feel like you've heard the saying, don't cry. There is no reason for you to cry. And now I actually think it's really good for you.
Okay, thank you so much for sending that audio file as well. Let's take a listen to this one more time.
When I was a kid, I feel like you've heard the saying, don't cry. There is no reason for you to cry. And now I actually think it's really good for you.
I really like how weak our consonant sounds are here and how our vowel sounds are getting enough space. That is allowing you to really link your words together in a way that sounds very smooth. Let me try to highlight a portion of that.
When I was a kid, I feel like you've heard the saying, don't cry.
Like when I was a kid, notice for instance how soft the end sound is. It's not when I was um even some of the consonant sounds like the D sound on kid, or like told and things like that. So I think we're doing a pretty great job at reducing our consonant sounds here, which is allowing our vowels to get more space. One thing I will say is it sounds to me like we may be using a low placement, but it feels to me like our lungs are doing a lot of the work. It's almost kind of like if I were to talk like this versus if I were to talk like this. So I would like to try to get more breath from the diaphragm involved because it feels to me a little bit shrill.
When I was a kid, I feel like you've heard the saying, don't cry.
Okay. There's also some notes here that apply from our previous audio as well, where it feels to me like every thought group is staying at the same pitch range. Like when I was a kid, everything's kind of going in around that same pitch range. Nothing's going crazy high. Like sometimes we have to go high, but also nothing's going low. No, nothing's like going down here. Okay, so we want to try to continue expanding that pitch range. But I think the biggest thing I want to just comment on here is just breath and diaphragm because I would like more of it. So like for instance, just kind of doing some of the exercises that if you go to youtube.com/fluentamerican, the homepage at the bottom, there's a list of videos that talk about breath and diaphragm. And I'd like you to explore those to get started. So for instance, if you put your hands on your stomach and you breathe in and you feel your stomach grow and then you breathe out, you can feel your stomach contracting. We basically want to have that little bit of that contraction every time we talk. And that's going to give you that low resonance sound. So instead of saying,
When I was a kid, I feel like you. When I was a kid, I feel like you.
It's like when I was a kid, I feel like versus when I was a kid, I feel like. So just the breath. Another exercise that we've done before, for instance, the train exercise we mentioned in a few streams. So, for instance, starting off with just breath and then gradually adding the sound and then gradually taking away. It's like, ah, ah. So that way you're transitioning from soft to firm to soft and things like that. Adding more softness, I think, will help engage the diaphragm a little bit more as well. I like your linking. I think the linking is very good. I think your thought groups can work, but we want to, when you change the thought group, change the pitch more. But the biggest unlock is going to be engaging the diaphragm more because right now I'm just not hearing a lot of resonance.
When I was a kid, I feel like you've heard the saying, don't cry.
Another way you can kind of tell this when your words are finishing, there's no breath extension. When I was a kid, stop breath versus when I was a kid. Do you see the difference? Kid, kid, or like feel like, feel like. Do you have a difference? Feel like, cut breath. Feel like, extending breath. It's that how the breath keeps flowing even after the sound finishes. I'm not getting a lot of that from this audio file, so that's something I would really encourage. Thank you to our friends who have sent us files. I'm looking for more files, as always, to consider for tomorrow. So if you're in our free Telegram group, you can do that. We also got some questions coming in over the weekend I want to try to take a quick look at. Give me a moment to identify them. This one is a little bit long, but we will try our best to address it. Thank you for sending this. I've been practicing speaking with a lower pitch and placement. When I do this, I'll feel like I'm running out of breath, and then I start slipping into vocal fry. I almost never get those when speaking my native language. I'm wondering if this is a normal part of the adjustment process. I know I'm on the right track. It means I might be doing something a bit off. Is there anything I can do to avoid it? Thank you in advance. Cool. Thank you for saying that. Well, I think that there is a good sign of growth because we're experimenting and doing things that are new and maybe feel a little bit strange. So I congratulate you on pushing yourself to explore. We don't need to enter vocal fry territory. Vocal fry is not something, for instance, when I'm talking to I engage in. At the same time, there's not necessarily anything wrong with doing a vocal fry. Why is there a vocal fry when people are talking? And if you're not sure what a vocal fry is, it's kind of like if we do like a this, you hear I'm like kind of crackling and things like that. Okay. That can happen, by the way, if we over relax. Okay. But it can also happen when we don't have enough air moving through the throat. So this is where I think doing some of those exercises I mentioned earlier about, for instance, like the train or some of those breath exercises on the channel, again, at the very last playlist that says how to breathe on the youtube.com/FluentAmerican homepage. So like, for instance, if I just breathe, I'm just like, there's no vocal fry there. If I add a vowel to that, there's no vocal fry there as well. It could be that we're struggling with that transition between vowel sound to breath. So making sure that that is smooth. If it's not smooth, it can turn to It's like there's almost like this gap between the vowel and it when it transitions to breath. We're hanging in that kind of limbo area too long. Instead, we want to make that transition smoother into the breath. So it's not it's just take out the middle part. Obviously easier said than done, but it may be easier to practice that looking at individual vowels like e. We don't want that a vocal fry. But if we do e, now that's a little bit smoother. So doing like exercises like that, focusing on some individual sounds may help if you're encountering that. Okay, let's try to answer one more question. Although, again, I want to thank people who have sent us everything. Here is our final question for today. All right, and thank you again for sending this. When the A sound comes before a nasal sound like M and N, how is it pronounced? Between which two sounds does the shift happen? For me, it changes from the S sound to the A sound. Could you listen to my pronunciation file? Unfortunately, I can't listen to it today, but we can talk about some general guidelines. That A sound like in cat is going to shift when you put a nasal sound after it. So when you add an N or an M or an NG after an A sound, it's not going to sound like a normal A sound. That's why the word cat doesn't sound exactly like it has the same vowel as can, cat, can, cat, can. You hear an ah, and. Do you hear that shifting? Okay. So some tips as you transition from the A to the N. You're gonna feel you may feel your tongue kind of sliding back a little bit. That's the very first thing. The other thing that might be even more important is that right before that N sound, you want to do a heavy breath out of your nose. So it's like and, and, and. So it's not can, it's can, because it's even though it's like ah and cat. Okay, so like it's words like can, man, sand, than, ham. So again, am. Just practicing that sound, and, and, where again you may feel your tongue group more towards the back of your mouth a little bit, but again, heavy breath out of your nose before the nasal sound. The last thing is try to keep the placement down. If your placement goes too high, you're going to say can, or like ham or plan, where it gets kind of nasally. In general, I would say avoid that. Though I will also say there are lots of native speakers in the U.S. that do have pretty nasally placements when they make sounds like this. Okay, you can find it in some regions, for instance, of the Northeast in the U.S. All right, I hope that helps you. But again, the heavy tip is heavy breath out of your nose. We have videos on the channel that do go over this in more detail. If you continue to struggle, I'll try to post a link if I remember afterwards. All right, I do have to run, but hey, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Can't do these streams without you. I know that there's a lot of pronunciation resources out there. So the fact that you're here is something I appreciate. I will see you all later. I hope you guys have a good day, have a good night, and a good afternoon. Take care.